I'm having a harder time with Canada because of the population and the fact that there's a lot of Canada that people don't live in. So I'm having a harder time getting a lot of monster stories, but there are a few.
For Bigfoot, I would think Canada, again, because that's where I ran into, me and my friend who was a medical doctor, that's where we ran up the Canadian Rockies. But you think about Canada, how vast it is, and it's not crammed like we are in our country with people. And you can go 100 miles and not see any farms, houses, or nothing. And I mean, there is areas out there that only get, how can I say it? They only get their supplies by train. There's no roads to where these farms or where these people live. The train will stop in front of a certain area. They unload the people's stuff, and then it takes off. So, I mean, it is more vast of areas that are open and unexplored than our country. And I think if anything is existing strange, I would think Canada would be a better bet, really.
Right. Oh no, and I agree with that, and I would bet that it is, and there are more monsters up there than there are in the United States. But then again, with the Canadian population mostly relegated to closer to the border to the United States than up in the wild areas. There's not enough people seeing them or reporting them. There are quite a few Bigfoot reports. I think my favorite being Old Yellow Top, which is a Bigfoot. I don't remember in what area it was that has a big mane of blonde hair. But there's lots of Bigfoot there. One of the things that I was hoping to find, and I've had a few reports of this, are Ice Age mammals that survived. There are a lot of reports of a what fits the description of a Jeffersonian giant ground sloth.
Now, can you explain? Can you explain to the listeners what it looks like?
Okay, a ground sloth. We see these sloths from South America, and they're cute and slow moving, but they're cousins from the Ice Age. Grew up to about 12 feet tall. They could walk on their hind legs. They often went on their hind legs to eat bark from the higher parts of trees. They, of course, covered with hair, had a tail a thick tail that helped them when they stood, and they had claws, three-fingered. They had three-toed feet, and they also were they were omnivores. They would eat about anything. So these sloths were huge and terrifying. And there is a legend of animals. The description is of this sloth, and I called it the Jeffersonian ground sloth. Thomas Jefferson named he named a ground sloth. This specific one, and it of course bears his name. But these were huge monsters, and there were reports of them. There was one. The latest one is still pretty old. 1985, an Inuit family encountered something that they described what it was, and when they broke out an artist's rendition of what a ground sloth would look like, they said that's exactly what we saw. And of course, these things have been dead for 12,000 years, according to science. But I mean, Canada, yeah, they lived in Canada. They lived all throughout North America, Central America, and South America. And one of the fun things about this sloth is that there are reports of the exact creature in the jungles of South America. So, maybe the giant ground sloth survived. I mean, it would be pretty cool to think that it did.
Yeah, I mean, now, James, the one guest we had on about 2 months ago What type of, wasn't that a ground sloth that he was talking about up in Oregon or somewhere, California?
Yeah, and he also mentioned about a giant beaver in Canada he'd come across. You remember that, where he'd come across the giant beaver? That was, and they think that it in theory, it tunnels underground and makes these big tunnels. But yeah, there's been several reports of this giant sloth also in, like what you said, to California, South America, right on up into Central America, and they're really big. I mean, we're talking 8-9 foot standing up. I mean, we're talking like Bigfoot big.
Yeah, that was around Sacramento area. Now this guy works for the state as a game warden, so again, I don't know. Again, we just going by what he said, but I could imagine. Jason, like in Canada, there would be, again, so many of these things like Bigfoot or other creatures. Because, you have the Canadian Antarctica there. You got the tundra. You got all that. And I'll tell you, there's some areas there that I don't think people even would survive, let alone live there. But who knows what's living out there. And have you heard anything about these giant big beavers at all in Oregon when you're, doing research about Canada monsters?
Well, in Oregon, I didn't.
Okay, you're breaking up there.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. How about now?
You're fine now. We can hear you.
Is that better? Is that better now?
Yeah.
Not in Oregon. In Canada, yeah, there are stories of enormous beavers. Thinking, if I remember correctly, it might be in the Northwest Territory, or was it Yukon? I'm not necessarily remembering, but yeah, I do remember the locals talking about enormous beaver. And again, back in the Pleistocene, there were giant beavers. There were giant everything. Going back to the Territorn, and why wouldn't they still live up there? There were camels in back in the Pleistocene living. The Pleistocene era camels lived in Canada. People have reported seeing them, in recent years. But there are also discussions on, well, was it the prehistoric camel, or was it the camels that were used as pack animals back during the gold rush days? That was actually tried, and it didn't work out. They couldn't walk around Canada as easily as they could walk around the desert. So the guy who bought them let them all go. So there were wild camels living in Canada back in the early 1900s.
I wouldn't doubt it. Even our own military back at one point experimented and brought camels over for our military.
That's who the Canadian gold people bought them from, the U.S. military.
Yeah, well, yeah, they found out it didn't work. But
right.
Their bones again have been found all across, like through, the Dakotas, Texas, Canada, everywhere. I mean, camels. When you think about it, you think of where. Egypt and places like that, but no, they were everywhere.
Right, as well as elephant, or at least the cousins of elephants were. That's another prehistoric creature that the woolly mammoth or the mastodon, either one, living up in the wilds of northern Canada, around the Arctic Circle. I mean, that would be perfect for them. There were stories from the 1800s of herds of these of mammoths walking around Alaska. So, man, I would love to see one of those.
Well, I don't know if I want to see anything after my encounter of something of a cryptic. I'm more content seeing my next door neighbor. But I'll tell you, there is things out there. And you know what? Things that they have said that doesn't exist, or that maybe hasn't existed for 10,000 or even more years ago, they're finding, well, gee, they run across something every so often, and that baffles the scientists. They don't know. They only assume that all these things have died out. And I got a funny feeling, depending on where you're at in this world, and the magic word is where you're at, I think things are still, existing. And I don't think they're coming out of a portal. I think they're still there. I mean, if I could live to be 300 years old and not age past 25 for those 300 years, I would have loved to explore and looked for some of these cryptids, because I do believe there is these things running around, at least some of them. Now, getting back to American monsters, what one is the most scariest one you wouldn't want to run across? Has any of them been ever been reported that actually loves eating humans?
Yes and no. The one I wouldn't want to run into is something called the boo hag from the East Coast, southern east coast of the United States. It's a vampire type entity that doesn't necessarily eat humans as in the flesh, but it sucks the life energy out of them. It's an energy vampire, and the boo hag presents itself as an old woman that doesn't have skin. It can enter a house through the smallest of holes, much like a mouse. They can go through anything, and it will, climb on the chest of a sleeping person and suck out their energy. And it doesn't suck it all out. If it likes your taste, it will leave and come back the next night, and leave and come back the next night until it does kill you. And then when it kills you, it will take your skin and wear it and go walk around. Walk around people, because it's normally can't do that when it walks around with no skin. So I think that one it would be one of the more terrifying ones to see.
Worried. Hey, isn't that Jimmy Jong? No, that's not Jimmy Jong. That is I don't know. Some of these things are really, when you think about it, scary. But again, I disagree with people when they talk about Bigfoot. I mean, there's so many people who think Bigfoot are here and they give off orbs and they're lovable and friendly towards humans. But, again, a couple of my members of my family are connected with 2 Indian tribes. They're married into them and, have children from tribe members. And one is a Muckleshoot, and I can't think of the other tribe. But I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to sit down with a medicine woman from the Muckleshoot tribe. And when I was asking her about, do Bigfoot give off orbs and they're friendly, she just broke out laughing. She goes, no. From what they were told, from story to story to story, from medicine man to medicine man to medicine man, that Bigfoot were creatures that they feared. And I've said this before. There was reports constantly, with the tribe, even that, the Muckleshoot tribe, of their members being down, washing the clothes in a creek or a river, and a bunch of Bigfoot would run in and grab either a squaw or grab a baby, and then the tribe members would go to, and, because they knew roughly where the Bigfoot, lived, and then they would find bones of their loved ones. With that, I want your answer when we come back. We have to go take a break. We'll be back in 4 minutes with Jason Offutt. Again, you need to get his book. And you can check out our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. You can check out his book there. It gives a lot of information about it. You can order it on Amazon. And we'll be back in about 3.5 minutes. You're listening to James out there, who's totally quiet as a mouse. That's about 12 feet high. And me, Gary, on Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark.
In life's journey, some ask themselves why the big time is passing by. They want it all and they want it now. No need to wonder how or why. They decide to make a connection with the bearer of light from the other side. It's a self-centered new world reflection. It's a one-way ticket for a hell of a ride. They're making a deal. Where the